In this series, we are diving deep into how healthcare IT can better connect with the business of healthcare. Today, we're going to talk about the challenges that you probably don't know exist in this industry. Let me give you a story. I was when I worked for a healthcare delivery organization previously. I was getting pretty involved in the industry and some standards bodies and some task groups, and I got invited to the FCC headquarters in Washington D.C. and it was co-sponsored by the FDA, and there was a lot of buildup to this. We had spent a couple of years, 3-4 years maybe, in prep for this event. We called it wireless test beds. Didn't have necessarily a better name for it, but we're trying to address this problem of reliability and compatibility that we all suffer with in healthcare. I would go to these conferences and peer groups and meet my peers, and everybody was generally always complaining about the same issues. Device manufacturers, were complaining. Everybody realized there's a problem. So fantastic. So I'm going to go. We go represent. I was representing as co-chair of the Amy's Wireless Strategy Task Force at the time, and we presented some content, but we stayed there for, obviously participated in the entire event. At the end of the day, I looked over to one of my good friends, Phil Raymond with Philips. Shout out, Phil. He and I've been in this battle for a long time. And I looked over to him and I said, what the heck did we just accomplish? We spent all day talking about the problem. Yet again, we talked about the problem, and there wasn't a clear solution that came out. There were some great presentations. You would talk about a who's who in this industry. They were all there. We didn't come up with any solutions. We had Tom Wheeler, the FCC chairman at the time, keynote this, right, and open us up, if you will. It wasn't from lack of the right people there. The problem is difficult. And let me tell you what I don't think a lot of people have in terms of the right perspective. And I'm going to have you role play. And as I'm telling the story, I want you to seriously role play yourself, in these roles that I'm going to go through. And I want you to understand the perspective. So first, I'm going to have you wear the hat of a wireless infrastructure manufacturer. And you know who those are, in healthcare, it's the Cisco's, Arubas, Extremes, Ruckus, you go down the list. When you make a wireless infrastructure, do you make it just for healthcare? No, you don't. You make it for all verticals. But everybody needs reliability, sure. Your competitors, they just came out with a new access point or a new feature. So, we got to jump and go do that. Well, now I just came out with this AP last year. Well, I'm working on the one that to come out for next year that's going to replace this one. And by the way, the year before that, we had another access point. And we didn't just have one; we had a line of them. So there's maybe several models for each access point. So we have all of this. Different versions because customers are asking you to, because you're playing the role of the wireless manufacturer. You have some that say, I don't need all those features. Give me a lower price point, right? So you're being pulled and stretched into all these different areas. So you come up with product lines and all these things, and you have constant churn. The chipsets you're buying, you may not be able to buy them a year and a half after you started that. So you kind of replace it. There's always variants and versions. You're coming up with new software releases. So there's constant churns. Then you have this healthcare group come to you and say, we're having these problems with reliability. How can you help us? And they're at the same time, retail, education, everybody's coming at you, right? Your resources are swamped. You're in constant battle within the market to get top of mind, to be top of mind in features and capability and functions. Your QA teams are always QA new releases of code. But here's the thing that you don't realize. Those QA teams are incredibly strained. When I say I know this, I know this. And this they're spending a lot of money on this. But when you look at it from a healthcare perspective, and you go into that they're going to be testing a whole bunch of things. Of course, you want them to test just your things, right, in healthcare, but that's not the way it works, right? They have to service all industries. So there's a set of tests that are run for healthcare, and they do their darndest to make that as quality as they can. But there are diminishing, there's a cost to do that. And it's, by the way, and it's a delay of launching a product or a delay of a software release. So they're being pressured, right? Get that out, get that out, get that out, right? So they put it out with, generally some decent amount of confidence, but then they find out pretty quickly whether it's not. So now I'm going to put this aside. So now I'm going to take off your hat as infrastructure manufacturers. I just want you to understand the perspective. So now you get theirs. So now now you make a medical device. You make a medical device that, you're really good at medical devices. You may not be good at Wi-Fi or maybe security or Ethernet or those things, but you're really good at medical devices. As a medical device, any more digital health, you have to be mobile. I mean, most of these things are mobile. The patient vitals, you want those to be automatically entered in the medical record. You have other business needs that again, we go back to business value that can be created by harnessing that data. And if we can put that into technology, maybe we can start to put triggers on alerts. I mean, we can do wonderful things to improve safety and improve care. So these medical device teams, they're saying, hey, I need you to go ahead and put this little Wi-Fi thing in there. Okay, well, we got it. Well, maybe. So these teams have had to come up very quickly to adapt to Wi-Fi. And these devices don't always get replaced every 2 years like our darn cell phones, right? These kind of stick around a while. And wireless has been changing. So in general, you might see a lagging of the technology adoption, right? And this just partially because of the buying cycles, and they tend to sit on things for a while. But here's the thing I want you to realize: you're in charge of QA now for medical device vendor A. They say, a customer comes to you and says, hey, I would like you to make darn sure. In fact, I'm going to go to my CEO, and their CEO is going to go to your CEO. If this isn't reliable, I put my name behind this purchase. I stuck my neck out there. I need you to make sure this thing works reliably. So now it's like, okay, you go to your boss and say, okay, I need to have a lab that has X, Y, and Z in there. Okay, wait, well, does this company have vendor A or vendor B, vendor C? Well, they have vendor C, but we should get vendor B, we should get vendor A, right? Okay, now which models from each of those vendors? I just explained there's whole product lines. And there's a new product line almost every year, it seems. So then you go, oh man, so this lab is starting to get a little big, right? I'm getting lots of different hardware options. So let's say you solve that. You make some decisions, you kind of make a, your best foot forward. Then you say, okay, what software version am I putting on these things? Wait, I just looked on the line, there's like all these different versions. Well, which one's my customer running? Well, guess what? Your customers are running up just about all those. And then you get past that. Then you say, okay, now how am I going to configure this? How does this customer have it configured? Oh, then how does this one? Wait, they're all different? So then you have to ask yourself, how am I going to test this reliably or to achieve reliability? How am I going to attain this if there's so much variance in the environment? So now let's take your hat off there. I'm going to put you on the customer side. So the customer, you're probably not relegated to just responsible for wireless. If you're like most healthcare organizations, you have a bunch of hats that you're wearing within your HGO. Yet, if you ask, okay, where's the lab that I can go test this thing in? You'll find that there probably isn't one. Most organizations can't afford much of one. I'm just going to leave it at that. Some of them don't have them at all. And I'm not saying engineers aren't doing what they can to do testing, but few organizations have a test lab. And even the ones that do, they don't have somebody sitting in there all day long and that are ready to say, yeah, walk right in, let me help you test. It doesn't work that way. So if they have one, oftentimes it's not working or it's barely working. It's like you can do some basic tests, but anything that's like a little bit more grandiose, it becomes a serious challenge. So you're resource constrained, you're financially constrained, you may not even have a space to put it in, you don't have the tools, you probably don't have the vertical experts. So I can send, my I'll just say one of my loved ones who's not technology literate. I could send he or she down there to run a test. What are they perceiving versus what an expert would perceive out of that same test? Pretty different things, right? So you need to have the right expertise in your team as well. So my point is this: we lack standards in our industry. And by a standard, I don't mean, well, we buy vendor B. That's not a standard. That's a procurement decision. And in fact, your procurement decision could be creating a problem for standards. And if you have too much stuff you're buying from that vendor, like i.e. too many product lines, you have too many different variants of their access points or controllers and even software. Standardization is, if we go back to the beginning of the series, we're trying to understand our problem. We understand our stakeholders. We're going to get into use cases. We're going to get into requirements. We're going to look at the big picture and develop a strategy that's based on requirements and clinical reasons why we're doing things. We're then going to figure out which technology we apply to solve that problem once we understand the problem. And once we understand that problem, when we get into the technology side, standardization is brought about by very thoughtfully and selectively limiting what you're deploying to make the QA problem and the engineering problem and the operational maintenance of the problem manageable. And we're going to keep ourselves from that slippery slope of, well, yeah, we can do that other little thing. Well, no, we're going to make sure our standard addresses the problem, period. And there's other things that we have to do, but we have to maintain our complete focus around that first. Standards are arrived from going through a really serious amount of work from testing a solution. So which means taking all of the client devices, medical devices, you name it, maybe critical software applications too, taking that into a proper lab setting, and that could mean many things, depending on what kind of test you're doing, but taking that into a proper setting to perform then a battery of tests that are calibrated against the use cases that it's intended to address when it's in full production anyway. Yet there's a bunch of technology components and key performance indicators and things that we're going to look for, but we don't do this as an industry as a whole. And that was actually the founding principle for why we started clinical mobility, because we realized everything else we do is treating symptoms of a problem and not addressing the problem. So it's like in healthcare, we need to promote wellness. There's a lot of dialogue around that. Because if we focus on wellness, we're going to prevent reasons why we have to go to the hospital, which then prevents costs for drugs and treatments. But if we focus on wellness, right, we're addressing the root of the problem. And I argue the root of the problem from what most organizations have is poor standards. And that's actually what clinical mobility was founded under. Yes, we have a variety of services to help with even little piece parts of our projects. But I hope that you learned something today, and I hope you appreciate standards now. And we are here to help you with your standards if that's what you need. But at the very least, I hope you learned something today. Thank you again for joining our series on aligning to the business of healthcare. Thank you.